Hey everyone, this is the Mind Workshop podcast, where we dive into the deepest parts of our brain and figure out what it really takes to be happy. And we also get experts and get their unique perspective on happiness. Today we have Stefan on, and we're going to dive into a little bit about the heart and the inner guidance. We're going to dive into a little bit about soul agreements and what that means. And I'm just really excited. And we're going to start out. He's going to give us a little intro about who he is, how he got into this, and then we'll dive right in. Stefan, thank you so much for joining today.
All right. Thank you, Victor. Thank you for having me here. It's a privilege. Thank you. A bit about me. Well, I've changed a lot. My name's Stefan Sczyrba, living here residing in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I got into this not by fluke or by chance. I got very, very lucky about 11 or 12 years ago after several near-death experiences. At the time, I was pursuing my career as a commercial pilot. I left the physical body, went to the spiritual side of things, and I'm like, well, they don't teach this stuff. And I was in a world beyond a world. I'm like, what am I going to do? So that was for me, that was the universe's way of giving me as an ultimatum that you're coming here to do something else. And I'm not referring just to me, it's for everyone. It's just, I want to push my luck a little too hard. And I was a workaholic and I had this dream and this goal as a commercial pilot. I was very lucky. I flew for a couple of years down in Toronto, got my flight time in. And then the universe is like, well, you got a couple options. You continue flying, you continue making that at the time I had a well-paying job, you can continue with that, or you can start over and get a good handle on things. So I took a risk, Victor. I took a chance on me for the first time in my life, and I decided I'm going to go in with this. And I said, well, I've done this. If this doesn't work out, I can always go back to my dream job as a pilot. And 11 or 12 years later, I'm still here doing what I need to be doing. So It's been a ride.
What went through your mind of making that kind of like life-changing decision? Because I feel like so many people get analysis paralysis. They're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to choose? And like, that's a huge life decision, a huge life pivot. And
It
your
is.
life would have been altered forever if you would have made a different decision. So what was going through your mind, and how did you end up making that final decision?
The truth of it was, or the truth of it being, it was really a no-brainer. And what I've learned over the years is, was I interested or was I committed? That was a big thing. When I made the decision years ago when I left high school that I don't think I'm going to become as a commercial pilot. Yes, there was an influence growing up in the family that you'd like to have somebody in the family, either as a lawyer or a doctor. And I put everything into it. But after that fifth near-death experience, and it came from just working. I was constantly working all the time. And I did whatever I had to do, and involved a lot of sacrifices, a lot of personal sacrifices to make that dream as a reality. And when it was finally there, I'm by the door. And I remember the one day I was under the airplane, I was having a suntan, and I'm like, this is pretty cool. I finally got the dream gig. And it's not a joke when I say this. It was a no-brainer because when I left my physical body and I went to the other side, this is where the universe showed me a few things that I'm going to simplify it. The soul, when each and every one of us, when we come down here, the soul invests a lot of time. And it can be anywhere from 50 to 100 to 150, maybe 200 years of the soul's prep time before we show up here. And we all volunteer to show up. So that was one thing I became aware of. The next thing I became aware of, which was very, very clear for me, is if I don't deal with this lifetime properly, I'm going to come back in the next lifetime doing the same thing all over. Once that became very clear for me, I said, I will do whatever it takes here. And I believe it, and I say this with sincerity, that the universe was genuine with it. It gave me that second opportunity. And I'm going to say this openly, I don't think we do get a second opportunity. We just don't want to blow it. When it shows up, man, when the stakes are on the table, it's you can make that decision very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my philosophy that I've always adopted is when it comes down to reincarnation, I don't believe the like direct individual of, like, for example, like me being a direct girl in the next life, or like let's just say I'm a one person
Okay.
in the next girl. I'm more believe that we're all connected under one consciousness, and um that we're all just like individual pieces of consciousness just living different lives, and like but we're all connected under one consciousness. And the reason why I believe that is because it makes me treat other people better, because I see like, oh, that person's being mean because that would have been me if my dad didn't love me, that would have been me if my mom
Uh,
didn't love me, and like then I have sympathy for them, and it makes me treat everyone a little bit better. And that's the
okay.
philosophy, the reasoning why I believe it. It doesn't necessarily like make sense, or, but that's the reasoning why I believe it. What are your thoughts on that?
You bring up a very valid question there, and I appreciate what you're sharing there. So I'm going to say it from my own perspective.
Hmm.
When someone is mistreated, it's not a good feeling. So when you have several experiences like that, and then when the tables turn and say I'm in a position to where I can give that benefit to somebody else, or being kind or having the empathy towards others, I'll do whatever it takes, because the other side of it's not so pretty. From the soul's perspective, you're going to get a laugh out of this one. Every
Hmm.
lifetime when we show up here, it's simply because we're all living recycled lifetimes. Because prior to us showing up here, we signed up for a soul contract. That contract is binding with the universe. I want to call it source, the universe, with the
Hmm.
soul. And that contract wasn't honored and wasn't completed. And when it's not completed, when we leave here and we go to the other side, the soul's like, the job didn't get done. So the soul's like,
Hmm.
you're coming back here. And often in certain families, where say if the grandmother or the grandfather or say the uncle, the aunt, or somebody in the family, when they're passing, and somebody else in the family is expecting a newborn, often what happens, they're not saying in all the cases, but as the one generation, when they leave here and they go to the other side, they'll reincarnate back into the family somewhere else
Hmm.
until those soul agreements are cut. And when you mentioned there a while ago that having empathy with others, or the feelings of mom or the feelings of dad, this is the juice of it. This is the minutia. This is the guts of it, because there's a soul agreement. So when we show up here, and when we come out from our mummy's, when we splash into this world here, and we have that first cry, it's like saying, "Shit, I'm back here again. I'm coming back here for the same physical experience. Get me out of here." And of course, when we're going from the 5D and way higher and we come into this lower frequency, it's a tough one, and it's game on. It's not like playing a game with this. It's our physical life with this. And then this is where we have to make those crucial decisions after that. And once I had those certain key pieces of information, I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And the programming that comes from mom and dad, those are the most difficult ones, the toughest soul agreements to unplug and cut from. And it's much like an extension cord, or say if you have like a cord here,
Hmm.
you have one end that goes from the mom and dad, and say one cord from me, one cord to my mom, one cord from me, one cord to my dad. So in the first 3 months in the fetus, this is where all the programming, or this is where all the development begins. After 3 months, the subconscious develops and then it starts recording everything. This thing records everything. And
Hmm.
then once we show up, then everything starts to begin, because the child is being energized by the mom's soul. And the moment that
Hmm.
umbilical cord is cut, then the soul enters that child, and away we begin. And it's not a
Oh,
joke with this.
yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like you come from more the individualistic soul angle, saying that each soul is kind of its own being almost, and they have to go through these soul agreements, and
Yes.
they basically come back reincarnated over and over until those soul agreements are broken, to eventually they get let free of something individually, rather than the holistic ideation that I was explaining before. So it's more individualistic, more the
I would say it's
holistic.
completely individualistic. And in stating that, and just to add to that, each and every one of us, we all carry a key. We all carry a key to unlocking something bigger here. So we're all in this collectively. Yes, 100%. And we're not leaving this area until that agreement is finished. We have to get that agreement done. And when I'm referring to that, I'm referring to the interference coming from the family, the culture, and the religion. And when people are stuck in the day-to-day affairs, whether it's discouragement, anger, the masks that are worn over the face, or I'll use me as an example that, hey, am I there? Was there as a commercial pilot? Look what I've done. Look what I've accomplished. I'm 100% in favor of doing whatever it takes to get there to make that dream a reality. When I pushed beyond that envelope, then when the real ugliness of life came through, I'm like, I have no choice, but I better deal with this. And once I started taking ownership of it, then this is where I started connecting back with, whatever you want to call it, as a soul. For me, it was a soul back with the universe. And I said, hey, I'm a very, very lucky guy that I stumbled into this.
Yeah.
And from there, I just kept persevering and I put everything onto the table. I wanted to find out for myself, is this really hokey or is this the real deal?
So, what are your thoughts on like animals and things like that? Because like obviously there's going to be aliens, or like let's just use animals because
Okay.
animals do exist, and
Yes.
I like, at least I believe that animals are have
Yes.
consciousness, and they have a soul.
Yes.
So how, like, they're obviously not going through as many agreements as we are because we're a little bit more conscious, and like how on the individualistic level, how are they either not fulfilling their agreements or filling their agreements if they're an animal?
Technically, I say they are fulfilling their agreement. They're coming
Okay.
here. They're coming here for a few different things. They've signed up for, like, we all volunteer showing up here. So we have a thing called free will. And when the animals show up here, they can be there as a guardian. They can be there as a form of light or as a form of comfort or having an animal in one's life. In the same hand, if you have rabbits or cows or chickens, if you have deer, they all signed up that they're going to be there at some point, used as a form of food source or being on the farm or as another resource. They're aware of that prior to showing up. The difference, I'd say, the negative side of it, or the thin line of it, is when things become abusive or things become corrupt or when there's greediness involved and they're all referring back to an energy. That's where things get twisted.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is like your version of the afterlife would be lots of, and I'm just gonna say individualistic balls because that's when I think of a soul. I think of like this big ball, like a big like glowing
The
ball, kind of like the
massive,
sun.
massive
Yeah.
ball. Yes.
Yes. Yes. And so I'm thinking of your version of the afterlife would be a bunch of different like individual balls or souls that are signing
One
up to
soul.
go through
Yep.
life, and um, the ones that are haven't lived or didn't go through their agreements within the life are basically stuck in a bad box in the afterlife, and then the ones that are free and did go through their agreements are in a good version of that box, and is kind of what I'm hearing. How off was I?
Yeah, it was pretty good, Victor. Let me see what I can do there to clarify with it. So each and every one of us, when we show up here, we're all in the same. We're all in the same pond. We're all in the same. We're all living on this physical plane. So that's one thing. We're all conscious beings, whether someone's enlightened or someone's on the street or they're homeless or they're an entrepreneur, they're a business owner. We all have that consciousness. We're all spiritual beings that when we show up here, we volunteer to show up here. The difference being, when we physically show up onto this physical plane, this is where we can make the changes. It's not when we leave here. I mean, I grew up in the Roman Catholic system. You work hard, you work for all of your life, and then at some point, when you leave here, you get to go to heaven. I'm going to be the first guy to say this on social media like this. That's that's a load of crap. I'm gonna cut to the chase because when you put the stakes on the line here, and I lost a friend to cancer many years ago. He was in his 50s. Nice guy, brilliant, works, great work ethic, was a dear friend of mine. When things like that impacted me, I started questioning everything. So then I go back to what you're asking me, that, well, we're living in this physical life. So what does it mean with closing the agreements? So when we all show up here, so prior to us showing up here, the soul says, you're going to have this type of a family, this type of a mom, and this type of a dad. You're going to live in this type of a country. Doesn't matter if you're living in the Western countries, a first world country, or an impoverished third world nation. It doesn't matter. I found out for myself here, I've been here hundreds of times. And every time I showed up here, I lived in a different culture, a different race, a different background. The thing was, I didn't close there's a map of consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins. On the lower feelings of shame and guilt, This is what gets people screwed up. Because when people when they have those energetic cords attached to them, they don't know how to unplug it. And when people get stuck into a program, so any program after 21 days gets stuck into their biological supercomputer. We're all spiritual beings and we're stuck in this physical body. In order to get out of this rut, we need to physically, while we're here, we need to unplug all of it. That's called personal ownership and personal responsibility. Once I found that out, I got into this because I put everything onto the line. It's not like mom and dad paid for my programming or paid for the schooling. That was like $120,000. And at the time, I had no idea I was going to cough it up. So I took on one job, I took on another job. And eventually I'm like, this sucks. And at the end of it, after 12 or 13 years, it was the feeling of resentment. And that resentment turned into hate and betrayal and all the ugly stuff that started to show up. And it's all recorded within the subconscious. So in order for me to unplug it, I had to make a decision. We meet sometimes throughout our lifetime, and throughout our lifetime, we meet the right people, 50 to 100 people throughout our life. If things are going great, we carry on. And perhaps we're lucky enough, we meet the teachers, we meet the right people, and they simply show us the tools or the guidance to clear out whatever's inside. And it's to go on the inside and clean up this internal mess. Mm-hmm. Once we clean that internal mess, and it has to be done in this physical time right now. Ideally, I got very lucky. I got introduced to this in my 30s. It wouldn't have happened to me in my 20s. I was oblivious. I was ignorant. I had no clue what was going on. I was a very hungry guy. I was very driven. But I had to reach a certain caliber in order to really say, am I really willing to grow up? And those are some tough questions to ask. And when you're talking with certain people, when they're 50, 60, or 70, are you talking to them in their physical age? Or are you talking to them mentally as that trapped 6 or 7 or 8-year-old boy or girl? That's going to be stepping on some toes. So as we evolve in life, it comes a point where you have to unplug it. Once we unplug it, because if we don't unplug it, when we leave here, we carry all that junk, all that collective information with us to the other side. This physical body stays here. When we go to the other side, the soul's like, well, I got another lifetime with this accumulated file of the same garbage, the same nonsense, another recycled lifetime. The soul eventually gets pissed by saying, that life was squandered. Now the soul needs to reinvest in another lifetime to come back here and do the same process all over again.
So, like, what I thought is it's very, when it comes down to the soul, it's very difficult for me to understand that in the afterlife that the soul has like emotions, because the emotions are very like a human characteristic.
Yes.
Because for example, there's a tribe in Africa that doesn't have anger. Like it's like not a thing. Like they don't have the emotion of anger. So these are concepts that we construct and based off our culture. And like if we were aliens on another planet or something else, we might not have any emotions. And so then that soul would be going through a different experience of whatever that non-emotional life. Like think about a life of a worm. Like there's not much going on. There's not emotions. It's just kind of like food. That's it. And then that's like the soul would be going through that experience. So it seems like giving the soul an emotion in the afterlife would be a very human characteristic that wouldn't be there because it's just a very human thing to give it. What are your thoughts?
Okay, I'd like to nail a couple of things. And you bring up an excellent topic, by the way. Mm-hmm. The soul is so big, it's so vast, it's not able to come down to this physical plane. Most of humanity is without their soul. Most of humanity is without their soul. In stating that, there's a silver cord that comes from the heart, and it goes all the way up to a slice of the soul. That's all we need. Just need a tiny slice of the soul. And it's all the information, and it's the life force that keeps us alive while we're physically here. What makes Mother Earth so special, and when we all volunteer to show up here, because on this physical plane with Mother Earth is dealing with the language of emotions. I cannot talk of the country in Africa or the one region that we're not dealing with anger. I don't believe that personally. Mm-hmm. I'll state for the face value. From my own perspective, it doesn't matter the race, the culture, the creed, the background. The feeling is a feeling. Love is a genuine feeling. We feel the feelings of love, joy. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to express anything. It's something that's felt on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
What makes this place so screwed up is the feelings of fear, anger, hate, rage, war, disinformation, being lied to, cheated on. These are some of the basic. If you go in the real world, it's everywhere. You
Mm-hmm.
can't hide from it. You can't run from it. And this is what we're all coming here to eventually climb out of. We're in the toughest school ground in the universe. When we show up here, it's to overcome this. And in order to overcome this is to say, I'm not going to hide from this anymore. I'm going to acknowledge it. And then it's to go back on the inside. It's to go back in there and unplug all of this lower frequency stuff. The soul, when it says it's time for someone to show up here, and I put my hand up, or you put your hand up, showing up here, the
Mm-hmm.
soul saying the soul cannot unplug this emotional stuff on the spiritual side. So when a soul decides to come here, it's making it very, very clear that whoever volunteers for the soul's behalf, when they show up here, the soul is asking, can you do the soul a favor? And while you're physically here, for me and for everyone, can you please go in there and unplug all of it in this physical reality?
Okay.
Not when we go to the afterlife. That's a huge myth. I want to make that very, very clear. If this was my last day on earth, and if I had a golden message to share with that, that's everything right there. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't like this life, or if you think that, hey, I've become a millionaire, I'm a multimillionaire, I have all these accolades, I have all these degrees, I've hit a home run, I got the Lamborghinis, I'm a huge Porsche fan, the soul doesn't give a damn about it. Because the soul's going to say, hey, so you made $1 billion, congratulations. The soul's like, you didn't get the message. You failed this lifetime. It's the lifetime exam. So
Okay.
until this, then we go back, and the soul says you have to come back here and say one lifetime person may be very wealthy, may have a lot of influence. And this is where things like karma, where if it's not dealt with in the next lifetime, the person may come back to experience poverty or racism. Person's white may come back as a black or as a Jew or someone from Japan or from some other part of the world. And you have all these attachments. These are soul agreements that need at some point to get unplugged. And this is where humanity's stuck with this.
So who constructed the world then? So like while we were going through the 13.8 billion years of like earth creation and like
Yes,
evolution and all that good jazz, who created the first cell, which created the first worm, which eventually got up
that's a
to
good
this point
question.
right
You're
here?
going right to
Who
the hub.
generated that?
Let me just think about this. You're going right back to source itself, the creator.
Mm-hmm.
And the source of the creator has always been here. And it's coming from the light. And its creation is to constantly create. That's its only agenda, is to constantly create, evolve, and elevate. We live in a world or in a sea of multiple universes. This is not the only one. And for the simplicity of this call here, at some point this planet was evolved, and what made this place, it's a very, very special place. It's a very unique place. It's a very beautiful place. In the cosmos, what the main emphasis why this place was built or constructed is for the souls. We all have karma, meaning, or the souls, or everything outside of this life force. There's good energy and there's negative energy. That's the simplicity of it. At some point, in order for the soul to evolve or to elevate, it needs to cut the negative energy. And in order for it to do that, the cosmos or the universe with God, they've devised a place called Mother Earth. When
Mm-hmm.
we decide to show up here, this is a place, it's a very special place. When we show up here, this is where we can clean everything up energetically, emotionally, 100% emotionally. So anything involving disease, uh, whatever it is, a coma, stroke, heart attack, these are things that if we're not on track with what's going on, the soul can intervene and shut us down to really recalibrate or think about what's going on in our life. Now, to get back what you're saying there, this place was created in order for the soul to release its entanglements, whether it's from all the lower feelings of anger, hate, guilt, shame. Grief is a big one, anger. Everyone thinks that anger is a really toxic one, but it's not really so much the anger, it's what's underneath it. The sadness, the grief, things that are not expressed and are either felt within the throat or not expressed from the heart. So when we physically show up here, this is the plane. This makes this place very, very special. This is the plane to unplug all this mess. This is the
So
place to
sorry. So
go
what are
ahead.
your what are your thoughts on Phineas Cage? Like with the so like obviously like the piece of the rod shot up through his eye into his brain, and then
Okay.
obviously like his piece of his brain fell out. He became a whole new person. So when it comes down to the soul like conversation, like
Okay.
obviously his soul was like dramatically altered. He went from a normal like clean cut guy to a very very like gambling toxic person within like a week. So like what are
Uh,
your thoughts on the soul argument of what's happening there?
okay. I'm not exactly aware of who this person is, but with the
Yeah, it's Phineas
context of the
Cage,
information.
1900s. A rod
Okay.
shot up through his head, a piece of brain fell out, and then he
All
became a
right.
completely new person.
Okay. First thing that's coming to mind here, we all have free will. So this is very, very key here. Each and every one of us, we all have free will. We all make a decision. If somebody's coming from a dark place, I say, I acknowledge it. I thank you for where you're coming with this. At least I'm aware where that person's standing with. If somebody has good intentions, I acknowledge and thank him for that. To go from one extreme to the other, it's going to involve a few things. It could be as a form as a negative entity. It could be involved with something from the subconscious or from a past lifetime where there was an abuse. That abuse could be like we were saying with gambling. So with gambling, what type of environment were they hanging out with? What were they addicted to? And usually a lot of addictions, there's something on the inside that isn't dealt with. When the severity of it, or when anytime when there's a trauma or there's emotion, when you add the severity to it, and if the severity isn't dealt with, then we can switch the polarity very quickly. Now, when I believe if I heard correctly, you're saying within a week, the person went from
Yeah.
one extreme to the other. I'll use me as the example. There was a time in life I was bartending for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out in the bar environment, everyone that was hanging around the bar, there's entities or there's negative life forces attached to these people. And they're attached to them because they're addicted to a certain feeling. So when people go to the bar and they're there to numb out, it's because there's some part of their life they don't want to deal with. And the best way that they can cope with it is to take a form of an addiction, where there's drugs or alcohol, anything to numb or numb out the pain, numb out the emotion.
Yeah.
Now, in
That
order
makes sense.
to answer that some more, the person can switch their life force. Each and every one of us, when we show up here, the soul also has 50% of the say in the contract. Meaning, when we volunteer to show up here and live this physical life, if we really get off course at some point, especially now no longer being in the third dimension, we're now in this fifth dimension consciousness, the soul can intervene at any time and give us a rude wake-up call to say, hey, we're off course. It's the only thing that can really get in there and change the course of events here. If we don't listen to the inside voice, that inside intuition, at some point the soul's going to say, hey, it's going to make the ultimatum. Either we're going to change, be the change, or we're getting out of here and coming back here for another lifetime.
I'd like you to dive into the soul agreements, and going into like what you think the like those agreements are a little bit.
Okay, 100%. This was a major reason why I got into this. Soul agreements. And I mentioned earlier on the podcast here that my soul's been here hundreds of times. And it was me every time that kept showing up. It was me that kept showing up in every lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So, soul agreements, in the simplicity of it, is when we show up here, the biggest soul agreements are the one coming from mom and dad. And there's no judgment and there's no blame. I'm going to emphasize we're living in a tough school ground here. There's no judgment and there's no blame. When we show up here, the things that either we hate or we love about our parents, because that's the gateway coming from the spiritual side and into this physical side. This is where we're adopting all their programming, whether it's biological parents, adoptive parents, just showing up, say if it's a single mom, whatever the soul agreement is, it means whatever we're coming here to show up and experience. So we all have well-chosen parents, a well-chosen culture and a background, and a thing called a human emotional experience. Each and every one of us, we go through it. It's one thing going through it, and there's no judgment or blame with it. The thing is, at some point later on, it becomes our own responsibility to go in there and then clean it up, saying, thank you for the lesson. Thank you for the experience. I no longer want to be attached to it. So you cannot go to the past and then say, I'm going to delete all this. That's a world of make-believe. That doesn't work like that. What we can do is we can go back and through a guided meditation. We can go in there saying, man, I remember this feeling. I felt so small. I felt betrayed. Or damn it, I wished that deep down inside, I wish I had the guts to tell that person off. Or I wish, instead of internalizing it, I wish I told this person to whatever it is. Those are the initial soul agreements. Those are the tough things because there's an energy. There's an energy. I'm not talking about the positive things, because the positive energies in our life of happiness, joy, leadership, authenticity, these are all the good energies. We want to keep those. It's the negative ones that get us stuck. It's the negative energies when we're not expressing our truth, when we're not saying how we really feel about things. Or deep down inside, we're feeling frustrated, angry, or I think for a lot, I'm going to use me as an example, wearing the mask and smiling all the time that, hey, everything's great. Everything's great. How are you doing? Oh, just fine. Hey, I'm ready to work again for today. And then deep down inside, there's that silent feeling of resentment or that grudge or the feeling of anger or sadness, and we just mask it up. Right? I done a phenomenal job of it. And after the fifth near-death experience, I'm like, I can't go like this anymore. If I keep going like this, I knew at some point I wasn't going to be as a pilot anymore. I was going to wind up in the hospital in my 50s, and that wasn't a joke. And I'm saying that because a friend of mine, like I shared earlier, in his 50s when he had died of cancer, that was a wake-up call. And I saw a lot of other wake-up calls, and then I stepped back from everything. So the soul agreements are, you have two images where there's a past experience. What we think about either as a perception or something that we experienced, whether we experienced it or perceived through somebody else's eyes. When we have that feeling, it's the feeling. The feeling is like that plug-in cord from ourselves to somebody else, whoever it was. At some point later on, we take the ownership and the personal responsibility, saying, I'm going to take this experience, I'd like to delete it and unplug it. When we unplug it, then on the other side, we all have we have spiritual guides from the light. You want to call them angels. They then assist us with taking these cords, unplugging them, and sending them back to the universe to close and clear them out for good. You may have heard of the thing called like the Akashic Records, a place where all the information is recorded. When we're physically here, you can see a lot of mediums or a lot of gifted people, and they can show you, well, in this lifetime, this happened. In the past lifetimes, who cares? Because somebody lived that life. We're not going back to that. It's this one right now that's the most important one. This is the one where things need to get dealt with. If this one isn't dealt with properly, nothing else matters. In the moment, energetically, when we clear out this lifetime, whatever it was, feeling anger, feeling pissed off, feeling betrayed, feeling side-blinded, feeling the feeling of enviness or jealousy, the moment when we unplug it from this lifetime, energetically now, in this new consciousness, we can go back to the past lifetimes and wipe out all those files and all those feelings at the same time.
Yeah,
this is the beauty of it. And once we clear it all out, another thought just came to mind here. I got told this many years ago, Stefan, do not build your empire, do not build your penthouse if deep down inside of you have holes and leaks in your foundation. Now, it was one thing hearing it, and then when I physically went through that experience where I thought I was doing well, it's a 6-figure job. My dream job was a commercial pilot. I had a nice sport bike. I was out skydiving in between. In the social media world, that looked like a dream job. That looked like the dream life, and on the inside, I was hanging by a few threads. So then when I stepped back from it, then the universe brought me down on my knees to say, it's time to change course. And then from there, I took things seriously because the pain of it was so tough. I said, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to change here. And then I started going on the inside. And it's not what happened for the last few years. I need to go back. Where the hell did this initial trigger and this initial boiler point come from? And it's all coming back from the fetus that's recorded up here and back when we were there as a younger kid. And most of the childhood experiences begin at the ages of usually 5 to 9. And the first 9 years are the most important fundamental building blocks. The first 9 years, if somebody's living in a wealthy, quality environment, it's a no-brainer. And by the time they're in the 40s or 50s, they're going to be living that type of a life. The same thing can happen to somebody, say, if they're born in, let's say, in an abandoned building. If dad's gone and the mom's whatever else is going on there, they can at some point change their life. They can radically change it, or they can go down the same life path, or they become very successful, and at some point they wind up dying of cancer because there's an unprocessed feeling there of anger or sadness, or the big one, there's loneliness and abandonment. And for a lot of us, I'm putting my hand up there, all masked it up. And eventually, at one point, it came up for me is I need to be authentic with me. I
Yeah.
had to be really authentic, saying enough with enough. Enough was enough.
And you talked about untangling your emotional cords, with
Yes.
the soul going through and untangling those emotional cords. I do this on a regular basis of finding weird things with me and then untangling them to really be a more holistic, more free spirit, basically.
Right.
Can you go into the surface level of kind of like what that means is when it comes down to the untangling that emotional cords and then dialing down a little bit deeper into it?
Yeah, by all means. When I got into this, initially I had no idea what any of it was. And I put a lot of this on blind faith and on blind trust that whatever the universe showed me, I'm willing to do what I need to do here. So we all have a thing called a trigger, that emotional trigger. Someone can show up there and you're like, feel pissed off or feeling angry, or man, it was either late or there's something going on in our life. And when I identify the feeling and through a guided meditation, when we all show up here, we're here with our soul, and we also have 5 spiritual guides from the light. Every one of us has this. I was very lucky and very fortunate. I had a phenomenal teacher with this. So when I got involved with this, I would do the guided healing meditations. And as I was doing this, whatever the feeling would show up, I'd ask my guides from the light to assist me. Can you please assist me in closing these files? These files meaning these cords, wherever they're coming from, they all came back down from me, from mom and dad initially. And then over the years, whatever else showed up, I had asked them, can you please assist me? And with me taking 100% ownership and responsibility, saying, I'm now taking ownership. I did things at the time to the best of my ability. I'm now willing to cut everything that's no longer serving me. And then through the guided meditations, my guides from the light would assist me with cutting all the initial files and feelings. And then step by step, I'd start going back on the inside and cleaning house within. And that's where it began. And along the way, I earned a phenomenal amount of trust with the universe doing what I'm doing. And it's much like what you're involved with, having your business or having your online presence with it. It's 100% commitment with it. And it's the same thing with the universe. And I kept persevering. And it's being able to persevere when there's influences from the outside, family, friends, work, saying, are you wasting your time? What are you doing? Why didn't you give up? Why you had a 6-figure job? Why did you walk away from it? But we all have that inside drive of why we're doing what we're doing. And I just follow that inside voice that's coming from our higher self, from our soul, saying, this is what we need to deal with. And I trusted that and honed that inside voice 1,000%. And I kept going with it. And what really blew it off for me, and I like to share this here, when I had my first blueprint, soul blueprint consultation of who I am, one of my gifts here is being as a remote healer. I had no idea of what it really meant. So I spent a couple of years and I went inside and I cleaned up as much as I thought that I could initially handle. The day came up where somebody was at work and they were sent to the hospital, either having a stroke or a heart attack. So I went home and I did a guided meditation. And then what I saw up here, not my physical eyes, but on this one up here, I saw my first healing gift. And the energy came in through the top of my crown and came out through both of my palms here. And that energy went to the person that was in the hospital. Once I experienced that, then that was like a complete game changer. That the universe we're all going through tests. And I had to put my time in, I had to put my effort in, the consistency of it and the diligence, because the universe was watching me. I didn't change for the first 35 years of my life. The moment I was genuine saying I'm willing to drop and quit everything, and I completely started over, the universe is saying, okay, this person's not talks cheap, but they're willing to do it. And when I did that, it took some time, but as I earned the trust back with the universe, they showed me drops of what I was capable of doing. I just became an entrusted channel. It wasn't me doing the healing work, but the healing came through with me because I was showing the universe I was willing to change. And that's where things started to open up for me, and I didn't look back.
That's awesome. And when it comes down to anything else that we mentioned, is anything else top of mind for you, either out of the topics that we mentioned or just top of mind in general that you've been seeing that you want to bring up today?
We, oof, all of our birthright here is being happy, being joyful, and being fulfilled. Treat each other with kindness. Be nice. Be the example. What I've learned is what I may take for granted, somebody else is willing to invest $5,000 or $10,000 to learn that one skill set. So I've learned in my life here having an immense amount of gratitude and not taking anything for granted. That was a big one. The biggest thing that's coming up for me here is if we think that our time is, I'm too old. I had a client that was in her 70s, or when they're too young. I would really vouch out for people to say that while you're here, this is the opportunity to go inside and clean up whatever it is. And it doesn't take a lifetime to clean it up. You can go in there within a few months, you can really clean house. Because when we leave here, if we don't like all the baggage that we got with us, we're carrying that with us to the next lifetime. I mean, technically, we do not die because we keep showing up here for the same thing. I wasn't joking about it as a repeat lifetime because my parents came from war-torn countries, from Germany and Holland. So I had all that programming there. So that took some time to unplug from all that as well. And like I said, it had nothing to do with them. I had to thank my mom and dad, saying, thank you so much for showing me all of it, for the contrast of it. And when I was really deep down inside at my lowest point, I said, I'm willing to do whatever it took, but that I took full advantage of it. So my thing is, if the universe shows you something that's of importance, take it and run with it and close as much of the stuff up as possible. At the end of it is to have a peaceful closure with the soul. You can do that, man. You're free and set for the rest of your life. From there, you can always keep elevating, growing, and evolving. That's another thing we're coming here for, and having fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So, on our last message, what would be your one action item to the audience to be 1% happier every day? What would be your one action item to leave with?
Be grateful.
Mm-hmm.
When you go into bed at night, spend the last half hour visualizing, thinking, being all the positive things. Was waking up feeling being happy, waking up feeling refreshed, being rejuvenated, feeling and being embodied, being youthful, embodied with a positive attitude. What am I grateful for? What were all the good things? What was I able to accomplish throughout the day? What is the dream, or what are my dreams? What are my goals? What's my to-do list? And genuinely coming from a place of peace and really appreciation. And when I wake up in the morning saying, I'm grateful and thankful that I'm alive. I'm grateful and thankful I have a new day with this. And today is a day where I get to grow, I get to change and being the better person. And assisting. Look, at the end of it, for the soul agreement as well, if you can assist just one other human being while we're physically here doing the deep work, that's it.
Yeah, I love that.
That's
And
it.
yeah, and unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. So I
Awesome.
know we can go on for this for 7 more hours. I guarantee it. Stefan, please tell the audience where to find you and how to find more about what you do.
All right. You can find me online through emotionalsoulhealing.com. You can email me at info@emotionalsoulhealing.com. And you'll find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and or Facebook.
Okay. Awesome. Stefan, thank you so much for joining today. Thank you everyone for watching. This is the Mind Workshop podcast, where we get experts on, talk about their unique perspective on happiness. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll catch you next time.